Can we talk regulation? What's the regulatory landscape going to look like? What does that mean for tech? How do you game that right now?
Well, I think the biggest thing, look, take any horror movie you want. That's really been what Khan's been to tech companies.
Khan at the FTC.
So when you look at Khan at the FTC, has really been that nightmare for big tech in terms of M&A, deals, anything they do. And that's been an issue. That's been overhanging on a lot of these stocks. Not just Google, Apple, and some others. I think the view is heavy view that she's gone at the FTC, and that ultimately will let a much more friendly deal environment for tech.
Dan Ives suggests that a Trump presidency could be a major positive for Tesla and the broader tech sector, unlocking significant AI valuation and easing regulatory pressures. He highlights the potential for a more favorable environment for mergers and acquisitions in the U.S., contrasting it with Europe's stricter regulations. Despite concerns about Trump's stance on companies like Google and Meta, platforms like TikTok might benefit from avoiding bans. He also warns of potential backlash from China if TikTok is banned, with Tesla and Apple being vulnerable to subtle disruptions like red tape or manufacturing slowdowns. While these risks could impact operations, Ives remains optimistic about tech growth, driven by AI advancements and strategic partnership.
Look, if you're a Tesla shareholder, for Trump getting in is basically a champagne moment. And I believe starts to unlock, we've talked about on the show, the $1 trillion of AI valuation now starting to get unlocked with Trump in the White House.
Yeah, just because of the jump in the stock yesterday, Elon Musk added $26.5 billion.
He made a good trade
to his spot. So,
he backed the right horse.
I guess it was a good trade.
All right, let's get some more on TikTok here. Let's bring in Fast Money friend Gene Munster. He is managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management. Gene, great to see you.
Hello.
So, I know you were listening to the discussion very intently that we were having here on the desk. Meta has upside, but not necessarily any down. I mean, do you think that there could be any sort of retaliation on the part of China if a ban on TikTok goes through?
Absolutely. I'll add my kudos to Rebecca for pointing that out, too. I do believe that this is ultimately part of the chess match that's going on with the Trump administration, with where his relationships are growing, potentially with Zuckerberg, and what that means for TikTok. And to answer your question is that if this, in fact, does happen, if the U.S. does go and ban this, I think there's two paths. One is that China just basically folds, and it's a negotiating piece by saying they don't want to sell. I say China basically controls TikTok. It's a negotiating point. They say they don't want to sell. That negotiating piece is basically to scare lawmakers that their constituents would be disappointed if the app got banned. But at some point, if it's clear that they are going to get banned, they could fold and take the $100 billion and walk. The TikTok shareholders. But if not, it's going to come down to, if this does in fact get banned and they don't take the money, there's going to be some form of retaliation. The two obvious targets are Tesla and Apple.
In what way do you think the Chinese could exert, pressure on Tesla, they could do whatever to their factories. In terms of Apple, what would be the way you would be concerned about retaliation?
So China is the master at red tape, and I spent 7 years, spent a lot of time in China, covering a lot of the China internet companies, worked with a lot of Chinese people, and I was taught just in terms of what they want to do things is below the fold. And so the master of red tape would be just making it difficult. How many hours a week? They could change some laws about number of hours a week that potentially someone could work. They could change how much power a given Foxconn factory can use in a given week. They can work. They did this to Tesla. They can impact the shipping, the trucking companies that would take the Teslas to port to be exported to Europe. They could do something like that with Apple. So I don't think it would be something where it'd be a big headline. The last piece that they could do is they could have a big influence in terms of how Chinese people think about Apple products or Tesla products. They obviously control like what Weibo and that language is, and they can influence that conversation. And so there's a lot of levers below the fold that can be used. Unfortunately for investors, it's not going to be an obvious headline. It's just going to be something where it just the gears of progress just slow.
So, Gene, is Apple mature enough and diverse enough now that, maybe 5 years ago this would have been huge for the stock, but in today's Apple world, it's not going to necessarily move. We're sitting here, it's at an all-time high, despite the fact that we're having this conversation.
So this is my biggest concern. I own Apple. Our firm owns Apple. I think that the stock is a big opportunity ahead of it relative to AI, but this is the biggest concern related to China. And to answer your question is that if we look at the total revenue from Apple, we estimate about 45% of that is somehow related to manufacturing in China. Now, as you said, that's been coming down, but it's still a relatively big piece. And what I described about that red tape, that slows things down. It doesn't take it to zero. It would be a slowing factor, and you'll know it, and lead times going up for products that are impacting the quarter. So I think investors are going to have some room to watch how these dials are progressing before any quarters report.
But that doesn't pertain to Europe, though, or does it? I mean,
Sure. Now, in Europe, big tech, I mean, they're used to fines are almost like cups of coffee there. So they're always going to get that from Brussels. But the big issue's been, Lina Khan from FTC has really been the big issue with her looking to be out. That's another part of this rally here, because I think what it's going to do is going to be a tidal wave of M&A. You're going to see big tech. You still have DOJ and some other issues, but you see them more aggressive from an AI perspective. And this is really what tech investors want to see. Less regulatory, and then we got to see a red sweep. You combo that, that's something that's a backdrop that's very, very bullish for tech investors.
There's been some comments from Trump and from Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, negative towards maybe some social media and tech in general. How do you take that into account?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're not fans of Google, Meta. The irony is, you look at TikTok, Trump getting in basically means TikTok, they're not going to get banned, and I don't think anything changed from an ownership perspective.
So with President-elect Trump in the White House, what does that mean for TikTok?
So from a twilight zone, even though he started to get the actual looking to get TikTok banned, Here we are, 180, it's the opposite. Actually not supporting a TikTok ban. So now TikTok doesn't get banned. Now part of that is because Trump is very negative toward Google, Meta. So when you think about it from a tech perspective, and you saw it a little in the stocks yesterday, I'd expect them a little 12-round battle that they'll be going through with Trump in terms of some of the issues around, what we see on social media, Section 230, which has obviously been the shield.
What is Section 230?
So Section 230 is really what shields social media companies legally, and that's been a big contentious issue. The view is, if Trump comes in, what happens to Section 230? I don't think anything happens per se, but when you look at some of the risk, quote unquote, in terms of big tech, definitely on social media, and then clearly on the China issue in terms of he'll be a lot harsher on tariffs, but now the difference is who's to his right as the whisper? It's Musk. So Musk is going to be able, I think, and the view is on the street, navigate these issues when it comes to China, tariffs, AI, with now being the sort of whisper.
In conjunction with an amazing partnership with Nvidia.
Well, it's almost like, though, no matter what part, let me use this analogy, of a car, you need metal for it. And the metal, in your case, is these chips. I know you have a relationship with Nvidia. Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, just came on the Clayman Countdown a couple of weeks ago after earnings. And here's what he said about all the people, all the companies lining up and putting in orders. Listen, and then we'll respond.
Our demand is greater than our supply. It's hard to at this moment, keep capacity and infrastructure available for every one of them. And so we're working super hard to get there as fast as we can, which is the reason why we're ramping Blackwell so hard.
Can you tell me what kind of shipments you've gotten of the Blackwell chips, which are the newest ones?
So Blackwell is in transition as we speak, and I quoted yesterday that our current backlog, as a couple of days ago, is more than $3.5 billion, and more than 1/3 of that backlog is Blackwell, which we expect to fulfill during the early part of 2025, because as Jensen said, he's trying to ramp that capacity in the manufacturing to fulfill all the demand. So we are already have Blackwell receipts in our supply, and then we're going to convert that backlog into revenue as we enter 2025.
Okay, but to be clear, they're in transit, or you actually have some of the Blackwell chips?
We have some of it, but we obviously need significant more, and then we expect the receipts of that as we enter the new calendar year.
Dan Ives argues that a Trump presidency could be transformative for the tech sector, easing U.S. regulations and unlocking significant AI-driven growth, especially for Tesla. While Europe's stricter rules remain a challenge, a favorable U.S. environment could boost mergers, innovation, and investment. However, Ives notes potential policy risks for companies like Google and Meta, even as TikTok might benefit unexpectedly. He also highlights the risk of Chinese retaliation if TikTok is banned, with Tesla and Apple vulnerable to disruptions through regulatory red tape. Despite these challenges, Ives remains optimistic about the tech sector's resilience and growth potential, fueled by AI advancements and strategic partnerships. How would eased U.S. regulations shape the future of AI and tech innovation? What strategies should companies adopt to mitigate risks from geopolitical tensions with China?